What happens when the closest person to a global legend simply disappears? For 12 years, Amanda Pearson was the shadow of Michael Jordan, the silent architect behind an empire that turned an athlete into a billionaire. And then, on an ordinary morning in Charlotte, she placed an envelope on his desk and turned her back on everything. What secret could be inside that letter that left the most competitive man on the planet speechless? The same woman who once negotiated billion-dollar deals and intimidated CEOs was now in one of the city's most dangerous neighborhoods, facing local gangs, alone. Why would anyone abandon luxury, power, and prestige by Michael Jordan's side to risk everything in an abandoned building? The media speculated about betrayal, rivalry, even a secret romance. But the truth was far deeper, a silent transformation that began years earlier, when Amanda witnessed something Jordan did far from the cameras. A moment that would forever change her view on what truly matters in life. The North Carolina sun poured through the wide windows of the 8th floor of the Spectrum Center, home of the Charlotte Hornets, lighting up the luxurious executive office decorated in the franchise's signature turquoise and purple. Amanda Pearson adjusted the collar of her white silk blouse beneath her perfectly tailored Armani blazer. The 42-year-old woman, with brown hair cut into a precise bob that framed her strong-featured face, stared at the letter she held between her impeccably manicured fingers. 12 years. 12 years as the Hornets' executive director of operations and personal assistant to the man considered the greatest basketball player of all time. Her blue-gray eyes, usually calculating, held something different today. She took a deep breath, inhaling the familiar aroma of Blue Bottle coffee her secretary had just placed on the mahogany desk. 12 years by his side, and I was never afraid of anything, she thought, aligning the white envelope perfectly with the edge of the desk. But today, for the first time, I don't know what comes next. The office was empty, just as she had planned. Michael usually arrived at 9:30 after his morning workout at the private gym. Amanda checked her Rolex watch, a gift she received after closing a particularly lucrative sponsorship deal for the Jordan sneaker line. It was 8:45, enough time for one last review of the pending tasks and memos she had neatly organized. Her eyes swept the spacious room, pausing momentarily on the walls displaying an impressive collection of memorabilia. The framed Chicago Bulls jersey, the 6 NBA championship rings carefully displayed in a bulletproof glass case, photos with presidents, celebrities, and iconic moments from Jordan's career, all meticulously arranged under her supervision, just like practically everything else in Michael's professional life over the last decade. If only my father could see me now, she whispered to herself as her mind drifted to the past. The same man who told me I'd never be anything more than a spoiled girl from Greenwich. Amanda couldn't help a bitter smile as she remembered how it had all started. At 30, freshly graduated in business from Harvard and with an MBA from Wharton, she had used every available connection, including an ex-boyfriend who worked for Nike, to land an interview with Jordan's business empire. Her only goal was to be close to fame, power, and the status that came with his name. The younger Amanda didn't care who she had to step on along the way. She'd been raised among Connecticut's elite, at debutante balls and exclusive country clubs, where she learned the world belonged to the strongest. Her teenage closet already had more shoes than many families own in a lifetime. Her journey to that point wasn't about overcoming, but pure social calculation and ambition. I guess my mother was right about one thing. Sweetheart, no one will remember your character, only your results, she murmured, recalling her mother's advice. But she never imagined I'd one day question that. A gust of air conditioning brought Amanda back to the present as her eyes landed on a more recent photo on the side wall. Michael Jordan cutting the ribbon at the opening of one of the medical clinics he'd funded in Charlotte, with his trademark smile, surrounded by children from the city's poorest neighborhood. She was there, a few steps behind, impeccable in her suit, holding a clipboard with event details. What no one knew was that day had planted a seed inside her, seeing the man who had everything still wanting to give more, without ESPN cameras around, without marketing deals involved, just giving. She remembered how, after the event, Jordan had spent hours playing basketball with the kids on a makeshift court, laughing as if he were a child again. Amanda had felt something strange that day, something she would later recognize as the first crack in the wall of cynicism she had built around herself. "What are you doing, Amanda?" she asked herself, leaning back in the Italian leather chair. "You know he'll try to convince you to stay, and you know you're the best at what you do." The phone on the desk rang, interrupting her thoughts. Amanda instinctively looked at the caller ID, just as she had thousands of times before. It was the number of the director of the charitable foundation Jordan had created to promote racial equality. The $100 million commitment announced in 2020 that she had helped to structure. Normally, she would have answered before the second ring, resolved any crisis, protected the schedule and interests of her boss just as she had flawlessly done for over a decade. But today her fingers remained still. The phone kept ringing as she watched, as if observing a scene in slow motion. After the sixth ring, the call went to voicemail. First time in 12 years. "It's better this way," Amanda murmured, feeling a lump in her throat. "They need to learn how to handle things without me. Everyone does." A sudden feeling of vulnerability washed over her, something so rare it felt almost like a foreign illness in her body. Amanda Pearson was not one to hesitate. She had turned down marriage proposals from 2 CEOs and 1 senator because she didn't want anything that could divert her from her upward path. She had been the first to arrive and the last to leave the office for consecutive years. She knew the secrets, the weaknesses, and the strengths of Jordan's empire better than anyone else, sometimes even better than Michael himself. Her legendary efficiency had helped multiply Jordan's fortune after his retirement from the courts, turning the athlete into one of the most prominent billionaires in the country. There wasn't a single contract she hadn't reviewed, a negotiation she hadn't at least overseen, a problem she hadn't anticipated and solved before Jordan even knew it existed. "He once told me I was more competitive than him in business," she smiled as she recalled, tracing the edge of the table with her fingers. Coming from the man who turned every game into a personal war, that was the highest compliment I ever received. The distant sound of the elevator arriving on the executive floor made Amanda straighten her posture. It was too early to be Michael, probably just someone from the finance department arriving to prepare for the quarterly meeting scheduled for next week. Amanda took the moment to do one last check on her appearance in the small mirror from her Hermes bag. No outward sign of the turmoil inside. Her face kept the professional composure that was her trademark. The same expression she wore when negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts or handling public relations crises. Only her eyes looked different today, reflecting something she couldn't quite name. Who would have thought the iron assistant would finally discover she has a heart? She joked to herself, carefully putting the mirror away. Footsteps approached down the hallway and, against all odds in her own mental scheduling, Amanda felt her heart race. No encounter with celebrities, politicians, or billionaires had ever made her nervous. But today she was about to do something she never imagined. Disappoint Michael Jordan. She stood up, smoothed out her black pencil skirt, and glanced one last time at the envelope on the table. The letter inside held not only her formal resignation, but also the explanation of her new plans. Plans that would have made her laugh in disbelief just a few years ago. She stepped away from the table and headed for the door, needing to leave before her determination faltered. "Come on, Amanda. You faced Nike board members and Gatorade marketing directors without blinking. You can handle this," she murmured to herself, adjusting the bag strap on her shoulder. But as she opened the door, Amanda froze. There, standing in the middle of the hallway in custom Nike athletic wear, with a coffee in hand, was Michael Jordan. At 62, he still carried the imposing presence of his playing days, his 6 feet 6 inches frame, commanding any space he entered. His hair was more gray at the temples, but his gaze, that gaze that made opponents tremble on the court, remained intensely sharp. He stared at her in surprise, clearly not expecting to see her leaving the office at that hour, especially not with a bag and without her usual clipboard or tablet in hand. "Amanda, are you heading out?" Jordan's familiar deep voice echoed down the empty hallway, one eyebrow raised in confusion. His piercing eyes, the same ones that had ruled basketball courts for nearly 2 decades, now studied her intently. Amanda felt her stomach twist. It wasn't supposed to be like this. In her meticulous plan, the letter would be found after she had already left. giving her time to compose herself before facing the inevitable conversation. But there she was, cornered by the one person who always managed to challenge her perfectly calculated strategies. She swallowed hard, realizing she couldn't just walk past him with a vague excuse. Not after 12 years. Not with Michael Jordan. Michael, she began, her voice betraying a slight tremor. Something so rare that she immediately saw Jordan's expression shift from confusion to concern. I left something important for you on your desk. I need you to read it. Jordan tilted his head slightly, the familiar gesture that signaled his full attention. The same movement he used to make before decisive play. What's going on, Amanda? You never leave before 7 at night, and it's... He glanced quickly at the luxury watch on his wrist. Not even 9 in the morning. And your face. My face? She instinctively touched her cheek, a rare display of insecurity. Your eyes. There's something different. Jordan stepped forward, his dominant presence making the hallway feel even smaller. In 12 years, I've never seen that look. That's all I need to know. Something serious is happening. Jordan's insight had always been uncanny. It was what made him such a formidable leader, both on the court and in business. Amanda felt the weight of the letter in her memory, the carefully chosen words explaining her decision. Words that now seemed insufficient in front of the man whose professional life she had helped manage for over a decade. Please, read the letter, she said, maintaining the professional tone that had always been her shield, though she could feel it slightly cracking. It explains everything you need to know. Jordan's expression shifted again, his eyes narrowing slightly as he processed the implications of the moment. In his years as an athlete, he had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when something important was about to happen. What his fans called killer instinct on the court. That same instinct now seemed to alert him that he was facing a crucial moment. It's a resignation letter, isn't it? Jordan asked directly without hesitation, as had always been his style. Amanda felt her heart skip a beat. Even after all these years, Jordan's ability to go straight to the point still surprised her. Yes, she replied simply, deciding that after so much loyalty, he at least deserved that. But there's more to the letter than just that, Michael. Much more. For a moment, the hallway fell into a tense silence. Jordan's face, so used to remaining impassive under the greatest pressures, whether sinking game-winning shots in the final seconds of NBA Finals or closing billion-dollar deals, showed a rapid succession of emotions, surprise, confusion, and finally a familiar determination. He nodded slowly as if processing a new game strategy. I'll read it, he said at last, his voice controlled but with a slight tone Amanda had never heard before. But don't think this ends with a letter on my desk, Amanda. Not after 12 years. And with those words, Michael Jordan walked past her and entered his office, leaving Amanda standing in the hallway, with the certainty that, despite all her meticulous planning, things would not follow the script she had prepared. After all, if there was one thing she had learned in her years working with the basketball legend, it was that Michael Jordan never, ever accepted defeat without a fight. Night had already fallen over Lake Norman when Michael Jordan stepped into his personal office in the 12,000-square-foot mansion. The space, unlike the modern efficiency of the Hornets' headquarters, was a personal sanctuary that few were allowed to enter. The soft lighting highlighted the dark wood-paneled walls where every achievement of his legendary career was meticulously displayed. The 6 Larry O'Brien trophies from the NBA Finals, the 1992 Dream Team jersey, photographs with presidents and world leaders. A mahogany bar occupied a corner, with an impressive collection of rare cognacs and Cuban cigars. Through the wide windows, the lights of the infinity pool reflected on the lake's surface, creating an ethereal contrast with the starry North Carolina sky. Jordan was still wearing the custom-tailored suit from the meeting with Nike executives that afternoon, but the tie was already loosened around his neck. In one hand, he held a glass of 25-year-old Macallan. In the other, the letter he hadn't managed to open all day. Damn it, Amanda, he murmured, swirling the amber liquid in the glass and staring at the envelope as if it were an opponent on the court. 12 years and you choose to surprise me like this. The silence of the mansion amplified every small sound. The clinking of ice in the glass, the soft ticking of the Patek Philippe clock above the fireplace, the distant sound of a speedboat cutting through the lake's waters. Jordan finally sat down in the Italian leather armchair, set the drink on the ebony side table, and opened the envelope with the surgical precision that characterized all his movements. The fine, high-quality paper betrayed the attention to detail that had always been Amanda's trademark. He recognized the flawless handwriting even before he began to read, the same he had seen in thousands of memos, contracts, and notes over the years. His eyes quickly skimmed the formal first lines of resignation, searching for the true reason behind those words. "So that's it," he said to himself, as his eyes narrowed with the familiar focus that fans had seen him use to dissect opposing defenses for years. "After everything we built together, you want to go your own way. But why?" The answer came in the following paragraphs, and it was like a shot Jordan hadn't anticipated, something rare both on the court and in business. Amanda Pearson, the woman he had seen transform opportunities into empires, who had negotiated record-breaking endorsement deals without blinking, who had managed PR crises like a maestro, was abandoning all of that to open a foundation dedicated to underprivileged youth. The goal, to offer opportunities in sports and business to those who would never dream of accessing that world. She planned to use her own savings, a considerable sum after years managing part of the Jordan empire, to launch the project without relying on sponsors or corporate partners. The letter detailed how she had already identified a neighborhood in West Charlotte, an area known for high crime rates and low educational levels, where young talent was often lost to the streets. "Who would have thought," Jordan said aloud, an incredulous smile forming on his face as he took a sip of whiskey, "the woman who once told me charity was just a PR strategy now wants to save the world." A sudden memory invaded his mind. 2020, the height of the protests for racial justice after the killing of George Floyd. Jordan, always cautious in political statements during his career, had surprised the world by announcing a $100 million commitment to organizations dedicated to racial equality. He clearly remembered Amanda in the meeting room, efficient as always, presenting a meticulous distribution plan to maximize both social impact and public image. At the time, he had noticed her absolute competence in execution, but saw no emotional involvement with the cause. Now the letter in his hands revealed how that moment had been a silent catalyst for her, how seeing him use his power and influence for something greater than profits and trophies had ignited a flame she didn't even know existed. "You were watching, weren't you?" he murmured, leaning back in the chair and looking at the ceiling, as if he could see the Amanda of years ago. "While I thought you were just crunching numbers, you were learning something completely different." The letter continued, describing moments Jordan barely remembered, but which had apparently impacted Amanda deeply. The opening of the first Michael Jordan Family Medical Clinic in 2019, when he not only cut the ribbon and posed for photos, but spent hours talking with local residents, hearing stories from families who couldn't afford basic health care. Charity dinner where, away from the cameras, he spent more time speaking with the youth served by the institution than with millionaire donors. Small moments when the man behind the legend revealed values that went beyond the fierce competitiveness that had defined him on the court. "I never did this to be an example for anyone," Jordan said to the empty room, remembering the teachings of his parents, James and Dolores Jordan, who had always emphasized the importance of giving back to the community. "I did it because my parents taught me that it's the right thing to do, regardless of who's watching." The phone in the inside pocket of his blazer vibrated, bringing him back to the present. It was a text message from Ahmad, his driver, confirming that the car would be ready at 7 a.m. to take him to the golf course. Jordan ignored the message and returned to the letter. The final paragraphs revealed another detail that genuinely surprised him. Amanda had already rented a space, an old abandoned community center in the heart of West Charlotte. She planned to begin renovations next week, using contacts she had made over the years to secure materials and labor at reduced prices. There was no request for funding, no solicitation for contacts or resources, just an explanation of her decision and a thank you for what she had learned working with him. "You were always too tough for your own good," he said, finishing the drink in one gulp. "You think you can walk into West Charlotte alone and change everything. Just like I thought I could carry the Bulls on my own before Phil Jackson showed me the value of teamwork. Jordan stood up abruptly, grabbed his phone, and dialed Amanda's number. He knew it by heart, like practically all important details related to his business and personal life, a skill that surprised those who knew him only as an athlete. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Amanda's professional voice asked the caller to leave their name, number, and reason for calling. Jordan hung up without leaving a message and immediately dialed again. Voicemail again. On the 3rd try, the result was the same. "This isn't fair, Amanda," he said to the silent phone, irritation growing in his voice. "You can't just drop this bomb and disappear. That's not how we do things. It never was." Jordan was rarely ignored. Since his NBA superstar days, the world had adjusted to his presence, not the other way around. Even after retirement, his name opened doors, closed deals, guaranteed access. The familiar frustration of an unresolved challenge began to grow inside him, the same feeling that drove him to train obsessively after a loss on the court. Without a second thought, he opened his laptop and accessed the company's integrated security system. As majority owner and president of the Hornets, he had access to virtually all information. With a few clicks, he located the exact address of the property Amanda had rented in West Charlotte. "Harford Street, number 1225, he read aloud, already memorizing the information. "Right in the heart of Beatty's Ford, Blood's territory. You really don't make things easy, do you, Amanda?" A mix of concern and determination took hold of him. Jordan knew that area well, not just from reports on the Hornets' philanthropic initiatives, but because he had grown up in Wilmington, North Carolina, and understood the complexities of underserved African-American communities in the southern United States. He knew that no matter how well-intentioned Amanda was, a privileged white woman trying to start a social project in that territory would face challenges she likely couldn't even imagine. "She's going to need more than spreadsheets and contracts to navigate this world," he muttered, picking up the phone again to make one last attempt. When the call went to voicemail for the 4th time, he made his decision. It was already late at night when Jordan left the office, swapping his suit for dark jeans, a black t-shirt, and a discreet Hornets cap. Even at 62, he maintained the physical shape that had been his trademark, with only a few extra pounds compared to his NBA glory days. He descended the main staircase of the mansion, passing by the impressive bronze sculpture of himself at the peak of his career, a gift from a Middle Eastern sheikh after a lucrative business deal. In the underground garage, he ignored the collection of luxury cars, opting for a discreet-looking black Audi SUV. He didn't want to draw attention, especially not in the neighborhood he was heading to. "Mr. Jordan, can I help you with something?" asked James, the night security guard, visibly surprised to see his boss preparing to leave at that hour without his usual team. "Not tonight, James. I need to handle something personally," Jordan replied with the calm authority that was his signature. "And if anyone asks, you didn't see me leave. Understood?" The car's GPS indicated a trip of about 25 minutes to West Charlotte, but Jordan knew shortcuts that would cut that time. As he drove, his mind kept returning to the letter. He had never imagined that Amanda, of all people, would be moved by the philanthropic side of his business. For years, she had been the voice of pragmatic reason, the one who turned good intentions into profitable strategies. How many times had she said, "Charity is nice, Michael, but let's make sure it's good for business too"? And now she was leaving everything behind to follow a path he had always believed was important, but never thought she truly valued. "People always surprise you," he said to himself as he watched the scenery change drastically upon entering the city's more impoverished areas. "Just like Larry Bird surprised me when everyone thought a white kid from Indiana couldn't play at my level." The streets of West Charlotte told a different story from the glitz and glamour associated with the name Michael Jordan. Here, abandoned buildings alternated with small businesses protected by iron bars. Graffiti marked gang territories, and even at that hour, groups of young people occupied corners with suspicious eyes on any passing car. Jordan slowed down, looking for the address while keeping his head low beneath the cap. The last thing he needed was to be recognized there, where his presence would surely cause a stir. "That must be it," he murmured, spotting a 2-story building with exposed brick, an old community school by its architectural style. The facade was covered in graffiti with broken windows on the 2nd floor, but a faint light coming from inside indicated someone was there. Jordan parked at a safe distance and watched the scene for a few minutes. It was then that he noticed movement at the building's entrance. Amanda, still wearing the same business blazer she had worn in the morning, was standing on the sidewalk, tense gestures indicating that she was in the middle of a heated discussion. In front of her, four young men between 18 and 25 years old, wearing red bandanas that clearly identified their affiliation with the Bloods, surrounded her with an intimidating posture. One of them, appearing to be the leader, was repeatedly pointing at Amanda's chest and then at the building, his body leaning forward in a clear display of territorial dominance. "Damn it, Amanda," Jordan hissed, quickly getting out of the car. "You really have no idea what you're getting yourself into, do you?" As he quickly approached, Jordan could hear fragments of the conversation. The leader of the group was explaining the protection fees needed for any business to operate in that area, while Amanda, with the same posture she used in corporate negotiations, was trying to argue that her foundation would benefit the community itself, including their families. It was surreal to see the woman who had intimidated CEOs and negotiated billion-dollar contracts trying to use the same tactics with street gang members, like watching someone try to apply chess rules to a boxing match. "Listen, ma'am," the leader said, his face inches from Amanda's. "I don't care if you're trying to save whales or children. In this neighborhood, you pay to operate, $2,000 a week or find another place for your charity." The determination on Amanda's face was evident even from a distance. That money should go to programs, not extortion. If you really cared about this neighborhood. The young man laughed, interrupting her. "We are this neighborhood, ma'am. You're just another rich white woman thinking you can save us. So what's it going to be?" It was at that moment that Jordan reached the group, keeping his cap down, but his imposing presence impossible to ignore. The young men immediately noticed the new presence, instinctively stepping back. Amanda turned around, the shock evident on her face as she recognized her former boss. "Michael?" The surprise in her voice was palpable. "What are you doing here?" Jordan ignored the question, keeping his eyes fixed on the young men, who were now exchanging confused glances, clearly trying to determine if they were really seeing the basketball legend in their territory. He took a step forward, subtly positioning himself between Amanda and the group. Years of interviews and public appearances had given him the ability to control any environment with his mere presence, and he employed it now, his voice calm but carrying the unmistakable weight of authority. "Guys, I think we have a misunderstanding here," he said, finally lifting his head and revealing his face. "I'm Michael Jordan, and this lady is trying to do something good for your families. Maybe we can talk about this differently." The recognition was instant, the young men's eyes widening as whispers of, "It's MJ and Jordan," passed between them. The leader, struggling to maintain his defiant stance, took a step back, clearly recalculating the situation. The territory, the rules of the game, everything had changed with the arrival of one of the most recognizable figures on the planet, a man whose image adorned the shoes many of them were wearing. "So, does this lady work for you?" the leader asked, his voice now less aggressive but still trying to maintain control of the situation. Jordan glanced briefly at Amanda, whose face showed a mix of relief, confusion, and irritation at his intervention. The tense moment was temporarily suspended, but he knew they had reached a critical point that would determine much more than just the fate of the abandoned building. The question now was how to turn a potential confrontation into something productive, a skill Jordan had perfected over decades in the business world after leaving the courts. "No," he replied finally, looking directly into the young leader's eyes. "She doesn't work for me. But believe me when I say, you really want to hear what she has to say." The morning sun filtered reluctantly through the thin layer of clouds covering Charlotte, highlighting the stark contrast between the skyscrapers of the financial district and the worn streets of West Charlotte. Michael Jordan parked his black Range Rover a few meters from the abandoned building on Harford Street. Unlike the previous night, when he had worn discreet clothes to avoid being recognized, today he was dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blue Italian suit, the armor he had worn in countless corporate battles since leaving the courts. The decision to return had been made during a restless night of sleep, filled with memories of his own childhood in North Carolina and the lessons his parents taught him about responsibility. The early hours of the morning had been spent making strategic phone calls to the Hornets legal department, followed by a conversation with the Charlotte police commissioner, an avid basketball fan and regular VIP box guest at the team's games. Now, as he watched the movement around the building, he immediately noticed something was happening. A small group of people had gathered at the entrance, and at the center of them, gesturing with the familiarity of someone in charge, was Amanda. She really doesn't waste any time, Jordan murmured to himself, adjusting the platinum watch on his wrist. Typical of Amanda to face a gang at night and come back to work the next morning as if nothing happened. As he got closer, Jordan could better distinguish the scene. Amanda, still wearing the formal clothes from the previous day, but now with her hair tied in a practical ponytail, was standing in front of four young men, the same gang members from the previous night. What was surprising, however, was the shift in the dynamic. There was no longer the threatening posture. Instead, they seemed to be in a negotiation. One of them was holding a clipboard, taking notes, while the leader, a tall young black man with a red bandana in the back pocket of his jeans, was pointing at different parts of the building. Amanda was listening attentively, occasionally asking questions and taking notes on her iPad. $40 an hour for each of you, weekly cash payment, no questions about your history. In exchange, you ensure the safety of the location and assist with the initial demolition, she said, with the same assertive tone Jordan had seen her use in multi-million-dollar negotiations. And most importantly, this place becomes neutral. No gang colors, no drugs, no weapons. During working hours, this building belongs to no one but the future of these children. The leader crossed his arms, his face a mix of distrust and calculated interest. And how do we know you won't call the cops as soon as we finish the heavy lifting? Or worse, once you figure out who we really are? Amanda's response came firmly. Because unlike many people who show up in neighborhoods like this promising salvation, I understand business. And good business is based on long-term relationships, not quick scams. If you do your part, I'll do mine. Simple as that. Jordan couldn't help but smile, recognizing the strategy. Amanda was doing what she did best, turning adversaries into business partners. It was the same approach she'd used years earlier to convince Chinese manufacturers to improve working conditions in the factories that produced Jordan-branded products. Not appealing to ethics, but showing how better practices led to superior products and more stable relationships. He moved toward the group, and his presence was immediately noticed. The young men straightened up, their body language shifting instantly to a more formal posture, while Amanda turned, surprise evident on her face. It seems I've arrived in the middle of an interesting negotiation, Jordan remarked, his deep, controlled voice carrying that natural authority that had made coaches, teammates, and opponents follow him for years. Good morning, Amanda. Looks like you got an early start. Amanda blinked twice, as she did when she needed to quickly recalibrate an unexpected situation. Michael, I didn't expect to see you here again. Especially not, she hesitated, looking at the sharp suit, dressed for a board meeting rather than a visit to a condemned building. The gang leader stepped forward, extending his hand to Jordan with calculated confidence. Marcus Williams, sir. I grew up watching your games with my father. It's an honor to meet you in person. Jordan shook the young man's hand, studying him with the same evaluative look he'd used to analyze opponents on the court. Behind the tough exterior and tattoos, he recognized something familiar. The same concentrated intensity, the quick evaluation of opportunities, the constant calculation of risks and rewards that characterize natural competitors. Marcus, Jordan replied, maintaining eye contact. Looks like you and your friends are about to become contractors. Quite the career change. Marcus didn't back down from the penetrating gaze. Just diversifying my interest, Mr. Jordan. Like you did when you bought the Hornets. The sharp, unexpected remark from a supposed gang member confirmed Jordan's suspicion. This young man was more than he appeared. A palpable tension hung in the air as the two men sized each other up until Amanda intervened, her professional tone masking the clear irritation at having her negotiation interrupted. Michael, I appreciate your concern in checking that I'm fine after last night, she said, emphasizing the words in a way only someone who'd worked with her for years would recognize as contained sarcasm. But as you can see, the situation is under control. In fact, we were just finalizing a few details about the start of the work. Jordan smiled. That smile millions would recognize from commercials and interviews. Charming, but with an underlying intensity that suggested he knew more than he was letting on. Of course, Amanda. I just thought I'd stop by to make sure there were no misunderstandings after our brief conversation yesterday. The other three young men, who had been quietly observing the interaction until now, exchanged glances. One of them, shorter with a visible scar running through his left eyebrow, leaned in to whisper something to Marcus, who nodded briefly before returning his attention to Amanda. "We'll let you two talk," Marcus said, tucking a small notepad into his jacket pocket. "We'll be back at 3 with 6 more guys to start clearing the debris from the first floor, as we agreed." Amanda nodded, extending her hand to seal the deal. "At 3, I'll bring the contracts and the first payment up front." After a brief moment of hesitation, Marcus shook her hand, signaling with his head to his companions. The four moved away, casting evaluative glances at Jordan, an odd mixture of respect and calculation that he knew well from his days facing opponents on NBA courts. When they were far enough away, Amanda turned to Jordan, crossing her arms in a posture he immediately recognized. It was the same one she took when she was about to confront him over business decisions she considered reckless. "So," she began, her tone controlled but clearly tense, "you decided to pay a follow-up visit. Should I ask how you found out the address of this place? Or would that be an insult to your obvious invasion of my privacy?" Jordan maintained a neutral expression, years of post-game interviews and high-stakes negotiations, having honed his ability to keep his emotions in check when necessary. "You worked for me for 12 years, Amanda. You should know I wouldn't just let you walk out the door with a farewell letter." Amanda let out an exasperated sigh, a rare sign that her usual composure was slipping. "This is no longer about you, Michael. It's not about the Hornets. It's not about your brand or your businesses. It's about something I need to do for myself." Instead of responding immediately, Jordan gestured towards the entrance of the abandoned building. "Can we continue this conversation inside? I'd rather not have our discussion as entertainment for the whole neighborhood." After a moment of hesitation, Amanda nodded and led him into the building. The interior contrasted drastically with the luxurious spaces where they usually met. Peeling walls displayed layers of graffiti accumulated over the years. The wooden floor, once polished, was covered in debris, broken bottles, and remnants of temporary occupations. Some broken windows allowed beams of light to dance on the dust floating in the air. In one corner, Amanda had improvised a workspace. A plastic folding table supported her laptop, architectural plans, and a rudimentary model of what the space could become. "It's not exactly the Hornets' executive office," she commented, noticing Jordan's expression as he took in the environment. "But it has potential. The building is structurally sound, just neglected, like many things in this neighborhood." Jordan walked slowly through the space, his Italian shoes absurdly contrasting with the debris. He approached the model, studying it with genuine interest. The project showed a multifunctional center, areas for professional training, a small basketball court, spaces for classes and mentorship. It was ambitious and, surprisingly, very well thought out. Typical of Amanda. "You really thought this through, didn't you?" he asked, looking at the intricate details of the project. "It's not a sudden whim or a midlife crisis?" Amanda approached, standing next to him in front of the model. For a moment, the tension seemed to dissipate, replaced by the familiarity of 12 years of analyzing projects side by side. "I've been thinking about this longer than I'd like to admit. Maybe since that medical clinic opening, when I saw that little girl tugging at your suit jacket and you bent down to listen to what she had to say, even with all the press waiting." Jordan remembered that day. The little girl, no older than 6, just wanted to thank him because her diabetic grandmother could now receive treatment. He had lifted her into his arms so she could cut the ribbon with him. An unplanned moment that the press officers loved, but for him it had simply been the right thing to do. "A smart PR decision," he commented, testing her reaction. "Probably generated more positive coverage than any prepared speech." Amanda shook her head, a slight smile on her lips. "That's the point, Michael. It wasn't calculated. I saw it in your eyes. It was genuine. And that bothered me for weeks, because it made me realize that, while you, the so-called business shark, the relentless competitor, could have moments of genuine compassion, I had become exactly what my father predicted. Someone who saw everything as just transactions. The unexpected honesty created a moment of silence between them. Jordan turned to face her directly, evaluating the woman he had known for over a decade, but who suddenly seemed different. Not just because of her less polished appearance, but because of a vulnerability she had never allowed him to see. "Why didn't you tell me?" he finally asked. "Why didn't you ask for my support, my contacts, my resources? You know I have an interest in projects like this. Hell, I have an entire foundation dedicated to similar causes." Amanda's eyes sparkled with a determination he knew well, the same she demonstrated when defending a business strategy she firmly believed in. "Because it had to be mine, Michael. Not the project of Michael Jordan's former assistant, not an extension of your charity empire. Something I built from scratch, with my own hands, my own money, my own decisions, good or bad." She paused, walking to the window to watch the kids playing basketball on an improvised court across the street, using a crooked hoop with no net. "Do you know how many of these boys have a father present at home? Less than 30%. Do you know how many will have the chance to go to college? Less than 15%. And how many will end up incarcerated or dead before 25? More than 40%. Her voice trembled slightly now, an emotion rarely seen in the Amanda Jordan had known for years. "When I grew up in Greenwich, my biggest problem was deciding which Ivy League college to choose. These boys have to decide every day whether they risk the longer path to school to avoid rival gang territories." Jordan stayed silent, allowing her to continue. He recognized this moment, the crucial moment in a game when you have to decide whether to pass the ball or take the shot yourself. In his career, he usually chose the latter, but he had also learned, especially under Phil Jackson's guidance, that sometimes the best thing to do was to let a teammate have their moment. "For a year," Amanda continued, "I organized donations in your name, planned charity events, wrote speeches about giving back to the community. But it was all abstract. Numbers in spreadsheets, photos for annual reports, brand strategies. Then at one of the clinics I helped open, an elderly woman hugged me crying because she could finally treat her arthritis. And I realized that, in my entire privileged life, I had never really made a difference for anyone." She turned to face him, her professional composure momentarily abandoned, revealing an Amanda he had never seen, vulnerable, but paradoxically stronger in her vulnerability. "I'm not trying to be you, Michael. I'm not trying to save the world or build a legacy. I'm just trying to finally do something meaningful with the talents I have. And I need to do it on my own, without the shadow of your name." Jordan absorbed the words, truly listening to them. It was an exercise his coaches, especially Phil Jackson, had insisted he practice. Not just waiting for his turn to speak, but truly listening. He took a few steps around the space, now seeing it not as an abandoned building, but through the lens of Amanda's vision. "You know these kids you're negotiating with aren't just troubled youth, right?" he finally asked. "Marcus Williams has a police record since he was 14. Drug trafficking, armed robbery. The kid with the scar, DeAndre Thompson, was arrested for illegal possession of a firearm last year." Amanda didn't seem surprised. "You think I haven't done my research? Marcus has been clean for 8 months. He got his GED in prison and has a sick grandmother who depends on him. DeAndre has been on parole and looking for legitimate work since his son was born. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Michael." An involuntary smile formed on Jordan's lips. This was the Amanda he knew, meticulous, always one step ahead. "And yet you're here alone, no security, negotiating with them." "Exactly because I'm alone," she replied. "If I showed up here with armed security or with you by my side from the start, what message would I be sending? That I don't trust them? That I'm just another privileged person, afraid of the community I'm trying to save?" Jordan considered the argument. It was solid, even though risky, like many of the best moves he'd made in his own career. He stepped closer to her, his imposing presence filling the space between them. "Let me help, Amanda. You don't have to put my name on anything. Hell, you don't even have to tell anyone I had any involvement. But you're trying to renovate a condemned building in one of the city's most dangerous neighborhoods with your personal savings and a gang as your construction crew. You're brilliant, but this is insane, she completed, a slight smile on her lips. Probably, but it's also necessary. And it's mine. I need to do this on my own, Michael. Please try to understand. Something in her tone made him step back. In his years as a player, Jordan rarely gave ground. But as a businessman, he learned to recognize when to push and when to step back strategically. This seemed to be a moment for the latter. All right, he finally said, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. But at least let me. His words were interrupted by a sudden commotion from the street. High-pitched screams from children pierced the air, followed by urgent calls for help. Amanda reacted instantly, running to the entrance with Jordan right behind her. Across the street on the makeshift basketball court, a young man of about 16 was lying on the ground, his body shaking violently from seizures. A small group of children surrounded him, panicked, while an older boy desperately tried to hold the teenager's head to prevent him from injuring himself against the concrete. "Tyler!" the older boy yelled. "Someone help! He's having another seizure." Without a moment of hesitation, Amanda crossed the street running, completely ignoring the traffic. Jordan watched, momentarily stunned, as she knelt beside the seizing young man, immediately taking control of the situation. With precise movements, she turned the teenager on his side, loosened the collar of his t-shirt, and instructed the older boy to time the duration of the seizure. "How long since it started?" she asked, her voice calm but authoritative. "About 2 minutes," the boy replied, visibly frightened. "He has epilepsy. The medication ran out weeks ago." Amanda nodded, keeping a firm hand on the young man's shoulder. "Does he have any other medical conditions? Allergies?" "He has asthma," the boy responded, "and diabetes, but he doesn't have money for the meds." Jordan moved quickly, phone already in hand. "I called an ambulance. It'll be here in 3 minutes." Amanda gave him a grateful look but kept her focus on the teenager, whose seizures were starting to subside. His breathing, however, was becoming visibly more labored. "He's going into respiratory distress," she said, her voice now carrying genuine concern. "Probably triggered by the seizure, complicated by asthma." The sound of the ambulance siren could already be heard in the distance. But Amanda knew every second was crucial. With surprising efficiency for someone who'd spent her life in boardrooms and not in medical emergencies, she checked the boy's airways and began maneuvers to optimize his breathing. Jordan watched, a new understanding forming in his mind about the woman he thought he knew so well. "Where did you learn this?" he asked when the paramedics finally arrived and took over care. Amanda stood up, her hands in previously immaculate blazer now dirty from the court dust. Her face displayed a mix of relief and determination. "Advanced first aid and basic life support courses. I started attending the classes after the first time we visited the clinic. I thought it might be useful." As the paramedics transferred the young man onto the stretcher, Amanda approached to ask which hospital they were taking him to. Upon hearing the answer, she exchanged a meaningful look with Jordan. It wasn't one of the good ones. Without hesitation, Jordan stepped forward, showing his ID and mentioning a few connections that immediately changed the dynamics of the conversation. In minutes, the teenager's destination had been switched to Novant Health, where one of the clinics funded by Jordan was located. "I'm going with him in the ambulance," Amanda declared, her voice not allowing for discussion. "Michael, could you?" "I'll meet you at the hospital," he finished, already grabbing the car keys. "And I'll make sure the best neurologist is waiting." Amanda nodded, a moment of mutual understanding passing between them, a reminiscence of the synchronicity they had developed over years of working together. As she climbed into the ambulance next to the young Tyler, whose name they had just discovered, Jordan watched her with a new perspective. The Amanda he had known, efficient, calculating, always immaculate, was far from the woman now holding the hand of an unknown teenager, offering comfort as the ambulance doors closed. When the emergency vehicle drove off, sirens cutting through the morning air, Jordan remained for a moment, observing the scene. Scared children, an improvised basketball court, deteriorating buildings, a world far removed from the packed stadiums and boardrooms where he had spent the past few decades. Then, with the determination that had characterized him throughout his career, he got into his car and grabbed the phone, dialing a number he rarely used personally. "Dr. Reynolds? This is Michael Jordan. I need a favor, and it's urgent." The fluorescent lights of Novant Health Children's Hospital cast a pale glow over the waiting room, now nearly empty as night fell. On the main wall, a discreet brushed steel plaque indicated the name of the primary donor, Michael Jordan Family Medical Center. Amanda Pearson, still wearing the same clothes from the day, now wrinkled and stained from the basketball court, sat alone in one of the blue vinyl chairs, her restless hands spinning a cup of long-forgotten cold coffee. The hours since the ambulance's arrival had dragged slowly. Tyler Jefferson, the 16-year-old who had suffered the seizure, was being treated by a medical team led by a world-renowned neurologist, who coincidentally happened to be available at the exact moment of his arrival. The initial tests revealed what Amanda had already suspected: the lethal combination of poorly controlled epilepsy, neglected diabetes, and chronic asthma. All treatable conditions that, due to a lack of access to adequate medical care, had converged into a perfect storm within the young man's body. As she watched the nurses rush down the hallway, Amanda felt the weight of a revelation that had been growing since the first time she had visited one of Jordan's social projects: the difference between intellectually knowing about inequalities and actually witnessing them firsthand. "What was I thinking?" she murmured to herself, rubbing her tired eyes. "I thought I could just show up in West Charlotte with spreadsheets and good intentions and change everything." The plastic cup in her hands cracked under the pressure of her fingers as memories from the day flooded back. The tense negotiation with Marcus and his gang, the confrontation with Jordan, Tyler's convulsing body on the rough concrete of the makeshift court. Each scene now seemed like a testament to her arrogance. For 12 years, she had organized donations, planned charity events, and managed foundations from the comfort of air-conditioned offices, always keeping a safe distance from the reality her spreadsheets tried to quantify. Now, with dried blood under her perfectly manicured nails and the smell of hospital disinfectant ingrained in her Armani blazer, reality seemed to laugh at her meticulous plans. How could she, who had grown up between debutante balls and country clubs, truly understand the needs of kids like Tyler? How could she expect to make a difference in a system that had failed them for generations? The impulse that had led her to leave her successful career now seemed naive, almost childish in its simplicity. "One thing is negotiating multi-million-dollar sponsorship deals," she whispered, staring at her distorted reflection in the coffee cup. "Another entirely different thing is dealing with real lives, where mistakes can't be fixed with contract clauses." The sound of firm footsteps interrupted her thoughts. Amanda didn't need to look to know that Michael Jordan was approaching. There was something in the rhythm, the cadence, the very presence that she would recognize anywhere after 12 years of working by his side. When she finally lifted her eyes, she saw that he had changed out of his elegant suit into more casual clothes: dark jeans, a gray polo shirt, and a discreet Charlotte Hornets cap pulled low over his eyes. His attempt to maintain a low profile in a hospital that literally bore his name. In his hands, 2 takeout packages from a restaurant she immediately recognized as Fahrenheit, one of his favorites in Charlotte. "I thought you might be hungry," Jordan said, sitting down in the chair beside her and offering one of the packages. "I know you probably haven't eaten anything since this morning. Still like the grilled salmon with that lemon sauce you always used to order, right?" Amanda accepted the package, surprised not by the gesture itself, but by the detail that he remembered. "You still remember my favorite order after all this time? Impressive for someone who often forgets the names of new players during board meetings." A brief smile lit up Jordan's face as he opened his own meal. "Selective memory. I've always been good at remembering what really matters. How's the kid?" The sudden shift to the subject that weighed heavily on both of them was typical of Jordan. Direct to the point, no beating around the bush. Amanda straightened up in the chair, automatically assuming the professional posture she used when presenting reports, even in the unlikely circumstances of a hospital waiting room at 10 p.m. "Tyler's stable. Apparently he's had epilepsy for 3 years since a bike accident. The family hasn't been able to maintain regular treatment since his mother lost her job and the health insurance. Today's seizure was particularly severe because he also has poorly controlled type 1 diabetes. He's been without insulin for almost a week. And asthma complicated the post-seizure recovery." She paused, realizing she was reciting facts as if she were in a meeting, her automatic defense in the face of vulnerability. "The doctors say he could have died if he hadn't received care so quickly." Jordan nodded slowly, his expression unreadable as he sampled his food. And how are you dealing with this? It's not exactly the kind of situation that showed up in your risk analysis spreadsheets for the Hornets. The question hit Amanda like a punch to the stomach, as direct as Jordan's famous shots in the final seconds of a game. She placed the untouched food container on the empty seat next to her, suddenly losing her appetite. The past hours had been an emotional whirlwind that she had barely processed, and Jordan's question opened the floodgates to the surge of doubts she had been suppressing. Honestly, I feel like a complete fraud, she admitted, the vulnerability in her voice surprising both of them. I thought I could make a difference, that my business skills and contacts would be enough. But today, when I saw that boy seizing, I realized I have no idea what I'm doing. This isn't a business problem that can be solved with a smart strategy or a well-executed negotiation. These are real people with real, complex, and interconnected problems that have existed for generations. Jordan remained silent for a few seconds, chewing his food calmly as he processed her words. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a tone that few had the privilege of hearing. Not the unshakable confidence of the basketball legend or the successful billionaire, but the humility of the man who knew his own moments of doubt. Do you think I knew what I was doing when I started? He set his food container aside, turning to face her directly. In 2019, when we opened the first clinic here in this hospital, I was terrified. Not about the money, that was just a number. I was terrified about the responsibility. What if the project fails? What if it doesn't make a real difference? What if it's just another celebrity name on a building with no lasting impact? The revelation surprised Amanda. In over a decade of working together, she had rarely seen Jordan express any form of insecurity or doubt. On the court and in business, he was famous for his unwavering confidence, often interpreted as arrogance by those who didn't know him well. Seeing him now admit vulnerability was like witnessing a rare eclipse. I never thought you had doubts about anything, she responded honestly. You always seem so sure of every decision. A brief, humorless laugh escaped Jordan's lips. That's the myth, isn't it? Michael Jordan, relentless, ruthless, always confident. Do you know how many shots I missed in my career? Thousands. Literally thousands. But people only remember the ones that went in. He leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the portrait on the opposite wall, a photo of him cutting the ribbon at the opening of that very hospital, surrounded by smiling children and local politicians. When we started the medical clinic project, I had no idea if it would work. I only knew that I had to try because I had seen up close what the lack of access to medical care does to communities like West Charlotte. Jordan paused, and Amanda realized he was considering how much to reveal, another side of him that he rarely showed the world. My dad, James, and my mom, Dolores, taught me early on that success without purpose is empty. They didn't have much, but they always found ways to help the neighbors, to strengthen the community. My dad used to say, Mike, God gave you height and talent for a reason, and it's not just to put an orange ball in a hoop. The mention of Jordan's parents added a new dimension to the conversation. Amanda knew, as most people did, about the tragic murder of James Jordan in 1993, a devastating event that had contributed to Jordan's first retirement from the NBA. What few people outside his inner circle knew, however, was the profound impact his parents had on his development, not just as an athlete, but as a man. I never fully understood why you were so committed to community projects, Amanda admitted. In my head, it was part of building the brand, a smart PR strategy. I know that sounds terrible now, but that's how I saw the world. Jordan studied her for a moment, no judgment in his eyes. It's not terrible, it's just limited. As you said, it was how you saw the world. The question is, how do you see it now? The question hung between them, simple but profound. Amanda felt the weight of years of conditioning, from her privileged childhood to her elitist education and success-oriented career, against the raw reality she now faced. The last 24 hours had forced perspectives that years of meetings and reports on social projects never had. I see that I built an entire life based on getting more, she replied slowly, articulating thoughts that were forming as she spoke. More status, more power, more recognition. I grew up believing that success meant beating others, not helping them rise with you." Something vulnerable appeared in her eyes as she continued. "You know what my dad told me when I got into Harvard? Remember, dear, in life, you're either at the table or you're on the menu. That was my family's philosophy, and it worked, at least professionally. But seeing you, someone who's already achieved everything they could want, still dedicating so much time and resources to underserved communities, that started to break something inside me. Not all at once, but slowly, year after year." Her voice trembled slightly as she made the confession she never imagined sharing with anyone, let alone Michael Jordan. "I've silently watched you for years. I saw how you treated the humblest employees with the same respect you gave the executives. How you actually listened to people's stories at community project openings. How you talked about your parents and your roots without shame or romanticization. And I started to realize that I had built my entire life on values. Empty values." Jordan absorbed her words in silence, giving her space to continue her revelation without interruption. Something in her expression changed. A new kind of respect, perhaps, as she revealed this side of Amanda that had never emerged during years of professional collaboration. "I'm not saying I had some dramatic epiphany," she continued almost defiantly now, as if expecting skepticism. "It wasn't a single moment like in the movies. It was gradual, small moments that accumulated until one day I realized I couldn't ignore it any longer. I found that I wanted to do something that mattered, something that helped people like Tyler, who almost died today from conditions that are entirely treatable without access to basic care." She paused, seeming surprised by her own admission. Then with a resigned sigh, she added, "But maybe I'm not the right person for this. Maybe it takes more than good intentions and corporate skills to make a real difference." Jordan studied her for a long moment, those penetrating eyes that had dissected opponents' defenses for years now evaluating the sincerity of her words. Then to Amanda's surprise, he smiled. Not the polished smile for the cameras or the predatory smile of competition, but something genuine and rare. "Do you know why I've always trusted you to manage crucial parts of my business, Amanda?" he asked, leaning slightly forward. "It wasn't just because of your competence, although you're exceptionally good at what you do. It was because of your tenacity. Never in 12 years have I seen you give up on something you truly wanted to achieve." He paused, letting the words sink in. "The question now is, how much do you really want this? Because making a real difference is infinitely harder than closing sponsorship deals. You will face failures that no business strategy can foresee. You will invest your heart in people who may disappoint you. You will work harder than you ever have, for less recognition than you've ever received." Jordan's words were not of easy consolation, but of direct challenge. The same approach he'd used throughout his career to extract the best from himself and others. Amanda felt something stir within her at the challenge. That same determination that had taken her from the privileged suburbs of Connecticut to becoming the right hand of one of the most powerful figures in the world of sports and business. "I want this more than any position or promotion I've ever aspired to," she replied without hesitation. "And I'm willing to fail, to learn, to start over as many times as it takes. Tyler almost died today because entire systems failed him repeatedly. If I can help fix just one part of that puzzle, if I can help even just a few young people get a chance, it's worth every second of doubt and uncertainty." A comfortable silence settled between them. The kind of silence that only exists when two people reach a new level of mutual understanding. After a few moments, Jordan stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the well-lit parking lot of the hospital. His tall figure cast a long shadow on the linoleum floor, reminiscent of the iconic presence that had dominated basketball courts for decades. "I've already arranged everything for Tyler," he said finally, changing the subject. "Consultations with specialists, medications, regular follow-up. I've also initiated a process to include his family in a support program that will help with stable housing and employment opportunities for his mother." Amanda wasn't surprised. It was exactly the kind of generous gesture Jordan often made away from the spotlight, contradicting the public image of a ruthless competitor focused only on victories and achievements. What surprised her was his next question. "Do you have a detailed plan for the community center? Something beyond that model I saw today? Automatically, she shifted into the professional mode she had mastered for years. I have a complete business model, 5-year financial projections, program planning based on the specific needs identified in West Charlotte, and preliminary profiles for the positions we'll need to fill. A knowing smile crossed Jordan's face. You really never do anything halfway, do you? Amanda shrugged, a little embarrassed. Old habits. Good habit, he corrected, sitting back down next to her. Look, I know you want to do this alone. I respect that, but there's a difference between accepting help and relinquishing control. Before Amanda could respond, the waiting room door opened, allowing a middle-aged doctor with a tired but satisfied expression to enter. Miss Pearson, Tyler's awake and would like to see you. He's stable and responding well to treatment. Amanda stood up immediately, relief evident on her face. The doctor, noticing Jordan sitting there, widened his eyes slightly in recognition, but kept his professionalism. Mr. Jordan, it's a pleasure to see you again. I'd like to personally thank you for the neuroimaging equipment your foundation donated last year. It was crucial in diagnosing young Tyler today. Jordan nodded politely, but kept his focus on Amanda. Go see the kid. We'll continue this conversation later. As Amanda followed the doctor down the hallway toward Tyler's room, neither of them noticed the discreet figure at the end of the corridor, a middle-aged man with a professional camera hanging from his neck, trying to appear disinterested as he adjusted the lens. Dave Perkins, a freelance photographer for the Charlotte Observer, had come to the hospital to cover an entirely different story about a new pediatric program. Finding Michael Jordan and his famous former assistant in an intimate conversation at 10 p.m. was the kind of coincidence that could turn a routine assignment into a newspaper headline. With a discreet and practiced movement, Perkins raised the camera and captured several photos in quick succession. Jordan and Amanda sitting close together, leaning toward each other in an intense conversation. Amanda accepting food from Jordan's hands, the unusually vulnerable expression on Jordan's face as he spoke about his parents. The moment their hands nearly touched when they both stood up. Isolated from their context and strategically framed, the images would tell any story a creative editor wished to build. Perfect, murmured Perkins to himself, checking the images on the small screen of the camera. The boss will love this. As Perkins silently moved toward the exit, already imagining the sensational headlines his photos could generate, Jordan and Amanda remained unaware of the media storm brewing on the horizon, a storm that threatened to further complicate the already delicate transition in their professional and personal relationship. The BLT Steak Restaurant, located in the heart of Charlotte's financial district, was as known for its discretion as it was for its premium cuts and extensive wine list. The private area in the back, separated from the main dining room by heavy velvet curtains and frosted glass walls, offered the kind of privacy that billionaires and celebrities paid a premium to guarantee. Amanda Pearson arrived first, as she had for the past 12 years. Wearing sunglasses even indoors and a silk scarf wrapped strategically to partially cover her face, she was discreetly escorted down an alternate path, avoiding the main entrance where paparazzi had regularly gathered since the leak of the photos the night before. The chosen table was in the farthest corner, with a view of a small Japanese garden, but no direct line of sight to the outside. The restaurant manager, who knew Amanda from the numerous reservations she had made for Jordan over the years, personally checked if her favorite bottle of Pinot Noir was already decanting and whether the appetizers, Wagyu carpaccio and grilled scallops, would be served as soon as Mr. Jordan arrived. Thanks, Melissa, but I'm not sure I'll be hungry today, Amanda said, placing 3 different editions of newspapers on the table. Did you see this? The Charlotte Observer headline screamed in bold, Jordan loses right hand. Empire at risk. Accompanied by the photo of her and Jordan in the hospital, skillfully framed to appear as if it was a heated argument. Business Insider took a different angle. Ex-Jordan assistant opens rival institution, business betrayal or personal revenge. Further down, a sports tabloid speculated with even less subtlety. Secret romance exposed? The real reason Pearson left Jordan's empire. Each report wove a more sensationalist narrative than the last, distorting 12 years of professional relationship and Amanda's recent philanthropic project into a salacious story of betrayal, unchecked ambition, or forbidden romance. The coverage was so absurdly far from the truth that it bordered on the comical, except for the potentially devastating impact it could have on both their reputations and, more importantly, on the future of the foundation Amanda had just begun to establish. "These vultures don't waste any time," she murmured to herself, spinning the water glass between her fingers. 12 years building a reputation, one night to destroy it. The soft sound of the side door opening announced Jordan's arrival, who entered with the same commanding presence that had distinguished him both on the court and in boardrooms. To Amanda's surprise, he didn't seem the least bit affected by the media storm that had formed around them. Wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal gray suit, no tie, and a discreet Patek Philippe watch as his only accessory, Jordan appeared perfectly at ease, as if he were arriving for a casual business meeting rather than an emergency gathering to manage a PR crisis. His calmness contrasted dramatically with Amanda's nervous state, her fingers constantly adjusting the already perfectly aligned silverware, an anxious tic that Jordan had recognized over the years as a sign of her extreme stress. "I see you're already aware of the news," he commented dryly, sitting down across from her after a brief nod to the sommelier, who immediately brought a bottle of Macallan 25-year-old whiskey in a crystal glass with a single large, perfectly spherical ice cube. "I must say I especially like the secret romances theory. Apparently, we've been having an affair for a decade without anyone noticing. Impressive, considering I can't even choose a pair of socks without some gossip blog reporting on it." Amanda didn't share his humor. Her eyes, usually calculating and controlled, revealed genuine panic, an expression Jordan had rarely seen on her face in 12 years. "This isn't funny, Michael. These headlines could destroy everything. Your reputation, my future project, the trust we've spent years building with partners and investors. They're painting me as an opportunist or traitor when all I'm trying to do is something meaningful without leveraging your name." Without responding immediately, Jordan poured himself a sip of whiskey, savoring the amber liquid as he studied Amanda, with that penetrating gaze that had made opponents retreat on the court. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a calmness that came from decades of facing public scrutiny at levels few could comprehend. "In 1993, the press speculated that my first retirement was actually a secret NBA suspension for gambling. In 1998, every detail of my divorce was dissected in real time. In 2009, my Hall of Fame speech was criticized as petty and vengeful." He paused, swirling his glass slowly. "And that's not even mentioning the dozens of times they declared the end of the Jordan Empire whenever some business hit a rough patch. The media creates narratives, Amanda. It always has. The difference is how we respond to them." The waiter approached discreetly to serve the appetizers, but a simple glance from Amanda made him step back with a silent request for a few more minutes. She leaned forward, frustration evident in every line of her normally composed face. "It's not the same, Michael. You were already a legend when these stories came up. Your brand was indestructible. I'm starting something from scratch, something that depends entirely on credibility and trust. How am I supposed to convince potential partners in the community that I'm not just an opportunist trying to exploit my connection with you when every newspaper in Charlotte is suggesting exactly that?" Her voice trembled slightly, revealing how much the situation was truly affecting her. "And worse, how does this affect the Hornets and your other businesses? The shareholders must already be questioning if there's any truth to these empire-at-risk claims." Jordan watched her for a moment, recognizing something familiar in her distress. The same kind of perfectionist worry he had felt throughout his career, the constant pressure of maintaining a spotless image while the world eagerly awaited any sign of failure. It was one of the qualities he had always admired in Amanda, her absolute dedication to excellence, her fierce commitment to protecting not only business interests, but also the integrity of everything associated with the Jordan name. Now, ironically, that same dedication was being used against her in the public narrative. "I'll tell you something I learned from Phil Jackson," he said finally, referring to the legendary coach who had guided him to 6 NBA championships with the Chicago Bulls. "Phil always said that when external pressure peaks, that's exactly when you need to slow down, not speed up. The natural tendency is to react, to counterattack, to try to control the narrative immediately. But often the best strategy is to breathe, assess the whole playing field, and then make a deliberate move." He leaned forward, his gaze intensifying with the same focus millions of fans would recognize from his game-changing moments in NBA Finals. So let's do exactly that. First, breathe. This is by no means the worst crisis I've ever faced, and it certainly won't be the last. Second, let's look at this not as a disaster, but as an opportunity. Amanda almost choked on the water she was trying to drink. Opportunity? Michael, they're basically accusing me of sabotaging your empire to launch a rival project. Or worse, suggesting we've had an improper relationship for years. How exactly is this an opportunity? A slight smile formed on Jordan's lips. That same confident smile that usually preceded an unexpected play that completely changed the course of a game. Because now we have your foundation in the national headlines even before it opens its doors. The kind of publicity that would normally cost millions. The question isn't whether people are talking. It's ensuring that eventually they're talking about the right thing. The frustration on Amanda's face began to give way to cautious curiosity. For 12 years, she had witnessed Jordan turn potential crises into strategic advantages. But it was usually her who devised and executed those plans. Being on the other side of the equation was a new and unsettling experience. "I'm listening," she finally said, leaning back in her chair. "What's your proposal?" Jordan gestured for the waiter, who quickly brought the appetizers and retreated after serving the wine. The aroma of perfectly prepared carpaccio filled the air between them, but both were too focused on the conversation to give more than a passing glance at the food. "We need to face this together, but strategically," he explained, his tone adopting the precise and calculated quality he used in critical business meetings. Not reacting defensively, not feeding the cycle of speculation with denials that only generate more headlines. Instead, let's take control of the narrative proactively. He cut a small piece of carpaccio, savoring it while organizing his thoughts. "What I propose is a formal partnership, not as boss and assistant, not as celebrity and protege, but as two respected professionals working together on something meaningful. I can help with resources, connections, open doors that would normally remain closed. But the foundation will be yours, Amanda, based entirely on your vision." Jordan paused, studying her reaction. "The key is the structure. Legally, the foundation will be an independent entity. You will be the executive president with full autonomy. My involvement will be as a consultant and board member, but without veto power over your decisions. This preserves your independence while simultaneously neutralizing the claims of betrayal or rivalry." Amanda listened attentively, her analytical mind quickly processing the implications of the proposal. It was an elegant solution to the immediate problem of public perception, but she couldn't shake a deep hesitation. For years, she had worked in the shadow of Jordan, executing his visions, protecting his interests. This project was her chance to finally create something of her own, something that reflected her newly discovered values rather than simply amplifying someone else's brand. "Your proposal makes sense from a strategic standpoint," she admitted, swirling her wine glass without really drinking. "But I'm afraid that no matter how we structure it legally, at the end of the day, it will just be seen as another Michael Jordan project. My message, my vision, it will all be eclipsed by your shadow, not by any intention of yours, but simply by the magnitude of who you are." Her eyes met his with a rare intensity, even for Amanda. "Do you understand what I'm trying to say? This is not just a new business venture for me. It's a personal redemption, a chance to finally use my skills for something greater than status or profit. If the foundation is immediately labeled as Michael Jordan's project, I lose the chance to truly prove, to myself more than anyone else, that I can make a difference on my own merits." Jordan nodded slowly, truly listening to what she was saying beyond the words. It was a vulnerability Amanda rarely showed, and he understood perfectly the underlying feeling. After all, hadn't he spent much of his own life trying to prove his worth, first on the courts and then in the business world? The irony didn't escape him. The same determination, driven by something to prove that, fueled his greatest triumphs, was now manifesting in Amanda. "I understand more than you think," he finally replied. "You know why I invested so much time and money in golf after I retired from basketball? It wasn't just for fun. It was because I finally found something where no one expected me to be exceptional, where every achievement would be truly mine, not just the expected result of being Michael Jordan. He paused, taking another sip of whiskey. But I learned a valuable lesson in that process, Amanda. Sometimes our desire to prove something to ourselves can limit the real impact we can have. If the ultimate goal is to help those young people in West Charlotte, we have to ask ourselves, what matters more? The purity of our personal journey or the tangible results for the people we aim to serve? The question lingered between them, loaded with implications that transcended the immediate crisis of sensationalist headlines. Amanda felt the weight of the truth in his words. For years, she had watched Jordan balance his fierce competitive drive with a pragmatic understanding of when to yield ground for the greater good of the team or business. It was a lesson she, with her own stubbornly independent nature, was still learning. You're right, she conceded after a long moment of reflection. At the end of the day, if this foundation helps even just a dozen kids like Tyler get a real shot, the exact path we take to get there matters less than the result. A genuine smile lit up Jordan's face. Not the calculated smile for the cameras, but something rarer and more personal. Now you're thinking like a true philanthropist, not a business executive. The sharp ring of Amanda's phone interrupted the moment. She rarely kept her cell phone on during meetings, a deeply ingrained habit from her days as an executive assistant when her full attention was required. The fact that it was active now was indicative of the exceptional situation. She was waiting for news about Tyler, the young man who had been hospitalized, who had been discharged that morning. "Sorry, I need to take this," she said, checking the caller ID. Her expression changed immediately, tension replacing the brief moment of relaxation. "It's Marcus." The name hung between them like a heavy cloud. Marcus Williams, the leader of the local gang with whom Amanda had negotiated permission to operate in the territory. Without waiting for a response from Jordan, she answered the call, instinctively putting it on speakerphone. "Marcus, everything okay? How's Tyler?" Her voice immediately returned to the professional tone she used in negotiations. "Tyler's fine, Miss Pearson." The young voice came through the speaker, but something in his tone immediately alerted both of them. "But I think you need to come down here. There was an incident at the building last night." Amanda exchanged a quick look with Jordan, a chill running down her spine. "What kind of incident, Marcus?" A brief silence on the line, then, "Someone broke everything. And I'm not talking about ordinary vandalism. This was organized, systematic. The new windows you ordered, every one of them shattered. The building materials either destroyed or stolen. Graffiti everywhere. Not the usual tags, but messages. For you." Amanda's blood froze in her veins. "What kind of messages?" "The kind that make it clear someone doesn't want you or your foundation here," Marcus replied, his voice now lower, as if checking if anyone was listening. "And before you ask, no, it wasn't my guys. This has the hallmark of the East Side Kings. They control the neighboring territory, and they weren't happy when they found out about our deal." Jordan leaned forward, his expression intensifying with the same deadly focus he showed in the decisive moments of important games. Amanda recognized the look. It was the same one he had when a business faced a critical threat, that unique combination of strategic calculation and relentless determination. "We'll be there in 20 minutes, she replied, her voice firmer than she felt. "Don't touch anything, and please keep your guys nearby." Hanging up the call, Amanda let out a shaky breath, the reality of the situation finally hitting her with full force. This wasn't just a matter of sensationalist headlines or distorted public perceptions. Now she was facing real physical threats in a territory where the rules of comfortable corporate boardrooms didn't apply. Her analytical mind quickly calculated the potential damages and financial implications. Insurance wouldn't cover vandalism in a high-risk area like West Charlotte, especially considering she had minimized the risks in the application to get a better rate. The savings she had planned to use for the next 6 months of operations would now have to be redirected for repairs and security. "This ruins everything," she finally said, running her fingers through her hair in a rare gesture of physical disarray. "Even if we ignore the headlines, even if we find a way to neutralize the public perception, I don't have the resources to rebuild after this kind of destruction and still launch the programs as planned. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars in damages, plus the additional security costs we'll obviously need now. Jordan watched her with an expression few had the privilege of seeing, not the fierce competitor or the calculating billionaire, but the man who had grown up in modest circumstances in North Carolina and never forgotten the lessons of perseverance taught by his parents. "Do you know what my father used to say when we faced obstacles?" he asked, already signaling to the waiter to close the bill. "He used to say, 'Mike, the size of the problem doesn't matter. What matters is whether you're bigger than the problem.' And then he'd make me work twice as hard, not to avoid the problem, but to grow beyond it." His eyes met hers with a quiet intensity. "The question now, Amanda, is not whether you have enough resources. It's whether you have enough determination. Because I can provide the resources. But the will to keep going despite the obstacles? That has to come from you." Amanda felt something shift within her at that moment, as if a final piece had clicked into place in a complex puzzle she had been trying to solve for years. For over a decade, she had watched Jordan face far greater obstacles than this, and emerge not just unscathed, but strengthened. It wasn't just the money or the fame that allowed him to do that, but an inner quality that transcended external circumstances. "Let's go," she said, standing up with a new determination visible in her posture. "We need to see the damages in person to develop an action plan." As they quietly exited through the back of the restaurant toward the waiting chauffeur, Amanda suddenly realized that this was precisely the test the universe was presenting her. Not a test of financial independence or social recognition, but of true commitment to the cause she had chosen to embrace. And for the first time since she had placed that resignation letter on Jordan's desk, she felt absolutely certain she was on the right path, regardless of the obstacles that would come. 3 months earlier, Amanda Pearson and Michael Jordan had stood in silence before what was left of her dream. The shattered windows, walls covered in threatening graffiti, destroyed construction materials. Nothing had been spared by the calculated fury of the East Side Kings. "It's over," Amanda whispered, her face pale in the weak dawn light. "A lifetime of savings wouldn't be enough to start over." "No," Jordan replied with the unwavering determination that had defined him for decades. "It's only over if you decide it's over." That same morning, as police documented the damages, Jordan and Amanda gathered the young men from Marcus's gang. "You wanted work? Now you have it. Let's rebuild this together." It was the beginning of a transformation no one could have predicted. Now, 3 months later, the Pearson Opportunity Center shone under the Charlotte sun. Where destruction once reigned, a modern structure with wide windows and a small front plaza stood. The rebuilding had been a testament to collective perseverance. Marcus and his guys had stood guard day and night. Residents volunteered. Local business owners, inspired by the story, donated materials. What had begun as an act of destruction had become the catalyst that united the entire neighborhood. The interior was unrecognizable. Spacious, well-lit areas replaced peeling walls. A computer lab equipped with cutting-edge technology occupied the old storage room. A library surrounded a study area with polished tables. The gymnasium, the most damaged by vandalism, now boasted a gleaming floor and a professional basketball court. Every detail, from murals created by local artists to vocational training rooms, reflected the vision Amanda had cultivated over the years. The crowd gathered for the inauguration represented a microcosm of the city. Teenagers in jeans and sneakers next to executives in suits, single mothers with young children, elderly community members, and, discreetly positioned at strategic points, Marcus and his friends, now officially employed as the security team. In the front row, Tyler Jefferson smiled shyly, the junior administrative assistant badge proudly pinned to his buttoned shirt. Having recovered from the crisis that nearly cost him his life, he would be the first official beneficiary of the paid internship program. On the small makeshift stage, Amanda adjusted the microphone. Her look had changed. The traditional corporate suit replaced by a more casual blazer over jeans, an exterior transformation reflecting her inner journey. When she began to speak, her voice carried an authenticity rarely seen in her days as an executive. "When we came upon this completely destroyed building 3 months ago, many suggested we abandon the project," she began, looking directly at the young people in the audience. But we found that sometimes we need to lose everything to truly understand what we're building. This center isn't about a building. It's about believing in the potential that's always been here. Amanda continued, sharing her vision without specifically mentioning her selfish past. Our mentorship programs, professional training, and educational support have been designed with one goal: to create real opportunities for talent that has always existed in this community, but rarely found pathways to develop. A subtle stir rippled through the audience when a tall figure entered discreetly from the back. Michael Jordan, dressed in jeans and a simple polo shirt with no logos, moved quietly to a corner, avoiding the spotlight. His presence, though magnetic as always, clearly did not intend to overshadow Amanda's moment. He briefly waved to a few acquaintances, but remained a respectful observer, not the main attraction. After the speech, while guests explored the facilities, Jordan finally approached Amanda. "You did it," he said simply, a rare, genuine smile lighting up his normally reserved face. "We did it," she corrected him. "This place literally wouldn't exist without you." Jordan shook his head, leading her to a quieter corner, away from curious ears. From an inner pocket, he pulled out a folded document and handed it to her. "I want you to see this before it's officially announced." Amanda unfolded the paper, her eyes quickly identifying the Foundation's charter and the incorporation documents finalized the previous week. Her name appeared as the sole owner and executive director with full authority. Neither Jordan's name nor any reference to his companies appeared anywhere, except for a small note as an anonymous donor. "Michael, this wasn't the agreement," she said, genuinely surprised. "After the vandalism, you were the one who made sure we had the resources to rebuild. Your guidance, your contacts. And not a penny of that matters if it's not your vision leading the way." He gently interrupted. "You were right from the start, Amanda. This needed to be yours. Completely yours." Amanda watched him for a moment, a new understanding forming about the man she had worked for all these years. Then, with a smile, she too pulled out an envelope from her pocket. "Coincidentally, I also have something for you," she said, handing him the sealed envelope. "I was going to wait until after the ceremony, but now seems like the perfect moment." Jordan opened the envelope, his eyes quickly scanning the letter. As he read, something rare happened. His normally controlled expression began to change, a genuine emotion rising to his face. The letter explained that the center's main mentorship program would officially be named the James and Dolores Jordan Mentorship Program, in honor of the parents who had not only raised a basketball legend, but a man whose values transcended fame and fortune. "Amanda." It was all he could say, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "I know how much your parents mean to you," she said simply, "and as their son, you've taught me, even without realizing it, that true legacy has nothing to do with trophies or contracts. It's about impact." For a moment, they stood side by side in silence, watching through the window as Tyler guided a group of teenagers across the new court, proudly explaining the programs the center would offer. No longer boss and assistant, but partners in something bigger than their individual careers. A year later, the Pearson Center had become a successful model for community programs throughout North Carolina. The transformation of the former vandalized building symbolized the change happening in the community itself. Windows that had once been broken now let in light into rooms filled with young people determined to change their stories. The innovative model combining professional training, mentorship, and personal development was drawing the attention of community leaders from neighboring cities who frequently visited the center to understand its methodology. 17 young people from the first group of participants had secured formal jobs at partner companies, ranging from small local businesses to established corporations in Charlotte. Marcus, now the center's security coordinator, had become a living example of transformation, using his natural leadership to guide other young people. 5 participants had received scholarships to local colleges, including Tyler Jefferson, who had enrolled in a nursing program inspired by his own experience in the hospital. The impact went beyond numbers. The youth crime rate in the neighborhood had dropped significantly. Families who had once avoided the area were now attending community events held on weekends. Tensions between rival gangs had diminished since the center had established itself as neutral territory. a place where the street code gave way to new possibilities. At the Mint Museum in Charlotte, on the night of a charity gala, the hall filled with business leaders, politicians, and community members awaited in anticipation. When Amanda took the stage to receive the Charlotte Community Service Award, her transformation was complete, not just in her more relaxed and authentic appearance, but in her essence. The relentless executive who had once been known for her calculating efficiency had given way to an inspiring leader whose mission transcended any personal ambition. In the front row, discreetly positioned to avoid drawing attention, Michael Jordan watched with a restrained smile. His eyes, which had so often sparkled with the intensity of competition, now reflected a different kind of pride, not for his own accomplishments, but for what his former assistant had managed to build. "The true legacy," she said in her acceptance speech, her voice firm but emotional, "is not in the trophies we win or the titles we accumulate, but in the lives we transform along the way. This is the greatest lesson I've learned from a true champion." Did you like the story of Michael Jordan and Amanda? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and don't miss the next video that's already waiting for you on the screen. I'll see you there. Oh, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what you thought of the ending of this story.